All right, everybody, we are live on the YouTubes. I'm Stallman Smith Jr. for the Unapologetic Apologists. My co-host is John Dunphy. Why did he change his name to Trinity Radio? I just left the last minute.
Because I'm at Trinity Radio right now.
It's throwing me off already. Very, excuse me, excited to have my two guests, Deflating Atheism, Braxton Hunter. Thank you for being here, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And glad to be here. Thank you so much for having us, Stallman. This is a true honor and a privilege.
Yes,
absolutely. Yes, I apologize that we are starting late to everybody out there. We were discussing flat earthers and faking the moon landing. So, always very fun conversation. So today is actually a debate review of Jordan Peterson versus Susan Blackmore on the Unbelievable program, asking the question, do we need God to make sense of life? And so I guess we can jump right into it here. I have two kind of preliminary clips I'm going to play. First is Jordan Peterson kind of setting up his worldview, then Susan setting up her worldview, and then we'll get into the comment. But so I will go ahead and add this to the stream. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say I'm having a thunderstorm over here, so if I cut out, you'll know why.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for letting us know.
Do you see yourself at least in the Christian tradition as far as your, I suppose, worldview?
There's no doubt about that, because I'm a Westerner. There's no escape from that.
Yeah.
I'm conditioned in every cell as a consequence of the Judeo-Christian worldview. And so I've read a fair bit in other religious traditions and have a reasonable grasp on some of them, I would say, not trying to overestimate my knowledge. But we're saturated in Judeo-Christian ethics. And so
I've seen you say that you certainly live your life as though God exists.
Yes, I would say, well, to the best of my ability. Right. Yeah. And I think that that's the fundamental hallmark of belief, is it's how you act, not what you say about what you think you think.
Sure.
What do you know about what you think? Seriously. I mean, we wouldn't need a psychology, an anthropology, a sociology, any of the humanities if our thoughts were transparent to ourselves. They're not in the least.
And you've been
in the least, they are, but
you've been.
All right. So that's the first clip. And so that's just Jordan Peterson kind of setting up his stuff. And I don't have too much to say about it at this particular moment, because it's going to kind of come out more throughout the debate. But a lot of people like to kind of accuse Jordan Peterson of more of a pragmatism. It's just more kind of pragmatic to live his life. I do think it is deeper than that. But Braxton, what do you want to say about this?
Yeah, so obviously the first thing that that would jump out at an evangelical like myself would be, okay, look, especially people doing what we do in apologetics and things like that. And I know that not everyone here is an evangelical, but to someone like me, it jumps out with, okay, when you say, well, of course I'm a Christian. I live in the West, or I was raised in the West. The response that most quickly comes to the mind as a knee-jerk reaction is, well, what you're describing is sort of a cultural Christianity, or it's like you're a part of Christendom. But does that mean that you are in any sense meaningfully a Christian in an orthodox sense of the term? But I think I think that question of what exactly Jordan Peterson means is something that perhaps we can unfold more later on. As he moves on, I think he makes a really relevant point about, look, if your beliefs are going to show up in how you behave, right? How you act is going to demonstrate your beliefs. And one of the things that I've often thought about, I think that is certainly true. And in fact, one thing that he says in this, I'm not trying to go on too long, I'll try to be brief here, but when I think about things that he says elsewhere in this very video, he says, he said it in that clip, we don't have access to our own beliefs like we think we do. We don't have the level of, I don't know how he said it exactly, but the specificity of our own psychology to the degree that we think we do. And if we did, of course, psychologists might be out of a job. So the thing about it is, when I look at myself, and this could actually maybe help someone who experiences doubt, and say, do I really believe that Christianity is true? That God exists, like ontologically, and all those kind of things. What comes to my mind is, well, Braxton, do you fear God? Yeah, I do. Sorry, by the way, atheists, we're Christians, expects us to say Christian stuff. But yeah, I fear God, and I feel the conviction of the Holy Spirit, and I try to manipulate my life to conform to what God wants. So even though I do that imperfectly, that propensity to do that demonstrates to me that I do believe, even when I'm in the midst of moments of doubt. Conversely, though, and I'd like to get you all's take on this. I believe intellectually that if I would just go to the gym, or if I would just take the fork out of my mouth, that I would be in better shape. I would lose weight. I would be more physically attractive to my wife. I know all these things are true intellectually, but I don't do them. So in what sense there do we say that my behavior demonstrates my belief? I think what we could say at the very least is, in that moment, I believed that I would be happier with the fork in my mouth or something. But I think these are interesting concepts. Those are some of my initial thoughts.
Yeah, Mr. Deflating Atheism, or as I know you, the Jonathan Lithgow with beautiful hair. What do you think about it?
Well, Braxton, we've been trying to tell you to go to the gym, but I'm glad you've come to this realization by yourself.
Self-aware.
But I've always had this problem with Jordan Peterson. I could never quite get to the bottom of this kind of interpretation of faith or of Christian belief. I mean, I'll gladly agree that Christianity is not just a bundle of propositions, but there you have to assent at some point to some propositions to be a Christian. It can't just be a matter of acting out. That seems very alien to me. And if you say we don't have necessarily access to our own beliefs, then well, how can we say that we're acting in accordance with them? So that's all very confusing to me. So I'm just admitting right now I have difficulty with this concept that Peterson often throws out. Yeah.
So Dunphy, I'll kick it to you real quick. But what I would say is as we get into more of this, I'm convinced that what Jordan Peterson, even though one might not explicitly say, I believe, for example, Christ rose from the dead, he definitely thinks that there's an objective foundation out there that grounds his actions. So I don't think he's just drawing complete separation between here's what you say about what you think and then here's what you act as if it's true, because that would be kind of a pure pragmatism. But he's saying, hey, I'm acting on something that does have an objective foundation, that he just might not explicitly call that Christianity. But Dunphy, what do you think?
Yeah, so when I'm a Western, those are just my values. I almost agree with them that people are raised Christian, and it's a title and they think it's a lifestyle until real serious decisions that come up where they actually have to apply their beliefs. Some are just completely unaware of it, and then some are self-conscious of it, and it becomes inconvenience for them. So I'm more of the cynic. Sorry. I'm more of the cynic when it comes to this type of topic, because I think people deep down, when they're faced with real moral choices, they show who they really are and what their will truly yields towards. And they're a Christian when it's convenient for them, and then when it's not, they let go of it. But I'm sort of an existentialist when it comes to that, not the psychologist or someone who just looks at it purely philosophical.
Right on. Yeah. So let me real quick. This is Susan setting up her worldview.
I interrupted.
But let's come to you, Sue. You may be familiar to some unbelievable listeners who have already heard you on the show before. I think you're happy to describe yourself as an atheist. Does that mean for you that you are a naturalist, someone who's committed to a view that our experiences can be fully explained by a purely material world?
No, I mean, I sign up in a way to naturalism groups and beliefs, but because I work on consciousness such a lot, and the problem of how do we relate the mind-body problem, here's this table, here's my glass of water. We'll agree that if I go like this, it'll go all over the place.
And ruin the microphone.
How does that relate to the taste of the water? These fundamental problems mean I have big queries about naturalism as you described it there.
Okay.
In a much broader sense, yes. As you know, and many listeners will know, I started out being a parapsychologist and rejected ideas of clairvoyance and telepathy and ghosts and poltergeists because of lack of evidence. So that's one way to naturalism, to throw that lot out. I was brought up like you as a Christian, and I threw that out because in the end it didn't make sense to me. So that's another way to say I'm left with naturalism, but I'm not left with a naturalism that explains everything. I'm left with a feeling that that's what I want to try to do, to understand what's going on here in minds, in bodies, in tables and glasses of water, and it's very difficult.
You're well.
So there's that. So I appreciate that kind of intellectual humility. We're saying, well, I'm not claiming naturalism can explain everything, but Braxton, one of the things you often point out on your show is the atheists will kind of say, well, I'm more of a lack of belief type person, but then. And she, later in the episode, goes on to make these positive claims. Well, religion is just a virus of the mind, or I can throw it away as like a fairy tale or something. So What's your take on her description of her naturalism?
So first of all, on the point you just made, this only occurred to me like a couple of months ago, but I want to make a video on it at some point because William Lane Craig and others will always try to say, look, don't let the atheist avoid their own burden of proof. It took me a while to get to the place where I realized a very simple way of demonstrating that most of them have a burden of proof in an obvious way. And that is, they'll say something like, well, no, I'm totally open to it. I'm waiting to be convinced or whatever. But then later in other comments, when they're being more casual, perhaps they'll say it's like Santa Claus, or it's like the Easter Bunny, or it's just magic, or it's whatever. Well, you're betraying there that you actually actively disbelieve. It's not just that you lack a belief. You actively disbelieve, or else you wouldn't be making those positive claims. So if you want to sit at the grown-ups table and have a conversation about worldview issues, you can sit at the grown-ups table in a couple of ways as an atheist. Either you can make all those comments. The mockery doesn't bother us. You can make all the comments about like it's like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and it's magic, if you're willing to then set up a case that atheism is true. But if you're going to do this lacktheism thing, then okay, you can sit at the grown-ups table, but we shouldn't expect to find you making these comments that are positive claims, because then it's hard to take you seriously because you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. But I don't. So I'll have to wait and see the portion that you're mentioning where she does that. Based on what she just said there, it was difficult to follow. I mean, I think I know what she's saying, but first of all, I'm a bit annoyed that, not annoyed at her, but just annoyed in general, that no matter how we try to define naturalism, the atheist in question much of the time is going to take issue with how we define it. And if it's that hard to define, maybe you guys need to do better expressing your naturalism. But she's saying here about naturalism that as he described it, she's not wild about it because let me see if I can steel man this. She's saying it's I tend to function in my work. I'm looking for a materialistic explanation. I think that most of the paranormal type stuff and religious stuff probably isn't the case. But since I deal with consciousness, I can't be, ironclad about that. But I'm looking for, it sounds like I'm reading her saying, I'm looking for a solution to this problem via materialism. And so I at the end of the day, I'm still not sure where she is. I want to say maybe she is taking kind of a lack of belief about the immaterial, but it's very difficult to see it clearly for me. So I guess I just don't have much more than that to say about it. I can't, it wasn't 100% clear.
Yeah. Mr. Lithgow, what's your take here?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're going, it sounds like she's trying to have her cake and eat it too. I mean, she says she's not expressing assenting to naturalism, saying that there's only the natural exists. Well, then why even bring it up in the first place? So it does sound, I'm going to agree with Praxis, she wants to kind of have the kind of naturalism cake without the burden of actually having to prove it, which is in principle unprovable, really. So yeah, I don't really know what you can do with that. As far as what you were saying about the lacktheism and having a burden of proof, often to justify the lack of belief atheism, they'll assert as a matter of fact that there is no evidence for God. Now that's a claim, that's a truth claim that in itself carries a burden of proof. So yeah, I'm just throwing that out too.
Good point.
Yeah, it's a great point. Dunphy.
So I think because of postmodern culture and society and Western thought, not even Western thought, just modern culture, I think we give ourselves too much reliability in our own intuition of what seems convincing, or what actually appears to be a lack of evidence to me. So I think because of that, we get skeptics where at one point, yeah, there's no evidence for ghosts or fairies or whatnot, but when it comes to consciousness, they just say, oh, well, that's mysterious on my worldview, so I'm not a naturalist. Not in that sense, I'm not a naturalist because I just don't think my mind is just my brain and so on. There was almost some sort of sense of duality there, but I'm just going to appeal to mystery, not know. But theism isn't true and Christianity isn't, because there's no evidence. So I think Rob is right there in pointing out.
John just reminded me of something that she said. She said that the reason she got rid of the Christianity was because it didn't make sense to her. Now, I'm sure she would have more to say about that if we were to probe that. But there are a lot of things that are true, that I believe are true, that don't make sense to me. Quantum superposition makes absolutely no sense to me. but I believe it's probably true. You know, there are a lot of things I believe that don't make sense. Your incredulity about a thing does not an argument make.
I mean, it happens all the time that an atheist can grill you. Oh, well, this Bible verse says this, and this appears to be a contradiction to me. It could say, I don't know, it doesn't make sense. But I find on the weight of the evidence, there's enough evidence to believe in the God of the Bible. That doesn't mean I have to be able to answer every single question about it.
Yeah.
I tell you what I think credulity is. I think they are assumptions that are not open to change. And those are your presuppositions. And when you have that presupposition, your beliefs will just follow that, and then they won't be open to change, even though you think you're actually open to change because you have a high view of yourself. But that's just my view, at least.
Yeah. So let me bring this back in. So this is a longer clip. This is roughly 4 minutes. And yeah, there's a lot of things that get brought up in here, and so there might be so as I say, wait, pause, I want to address it, but I did list them out here, so we'll be able to get to all of them once the clip is over.
I do believe that the biblical texts are foundational. I believe it in the Nietzschean sense. And, Nietzsche, of course, announced famously in the late 1800s that God was dead. And the typical rationalist atheist regards that as a triumphalist proclamation. But that wasn't that for Nietzsche. And Nietzsche knew perfectly well and said immediately afterward that the consequences of that was going to be bloody catastrophe because everything was going to fall. And he predicted the rise of communism, for example, and the deaths of tens of millions of people in the aftermath of the death of God. Because Nietzsche knew perfectly well that when you pull the cornerstone out from underneath a building, that even though it may stay aloft in midair like a cartoon character that's wandered off a cliff for some period of time, that it will inevitably crumble and that it will be replaced by something that's perhaps far worse. Now, Nietzsche hoped it would be replaced by man's ability to recreate meaning spontaneously out of his psyche, for example, which I think is a doomed enterprise. But he knew that in the interval, it would be replaced by both nihilism and by communist totalitarianism, which is a hell of a prediction because it was done like 40 years before the events actually unfolded.
Well, so, you can see it that way, but if that is the case, why do we have evidence that the most dysfunctional societies today are the most religious? And for example, in the United States of America, the higher, if you go across different states, the higher belief in God is proclaimed belief in God, whatever you think that means, the more murders, suicides, marital breakdown, various measures of dysfunctional society are.
Well, it depends on how you define religion in part. I mean, first of all, America is a very religious country. And to think of it as a country that's doing worse than other countries in the world is just not the case.
Well, its incarceration rate is higher than any other.
Well, true, but so is its standard of living and its what would you say, ability to provide the basic essentials of life for people and the essential freedoms that go along with that. You wouldn't compare that to an African dictatorship.
No. But most of these studies have been done only in developed societies. But there, if you look at income inequality, that's much worse in the States. So yes, a lot of people in the States have a very high standard of living, but the poorest are really poor.
Yes. Well, income inequality.
With Obamacare being dismantled and so on.
Well,
but nevertheless, let me go back to that point. We know that more dysfunctional societies have higher proclaimed belief, higher attendance in church, and so on. Now, this doesn't fit with what you were saying. Now, Nietzsche's ideas are very profound and interesting, but I just want to stop you from saying that he was absolutely right about somehow if we get rid of God, we're going to be worse, because we have very well-functioning societies.
Well, we were pretty bad in the 20th century.
Oh, we were, yes. People were.
And we could easily drift that way again.
And there've been terrible bad things done in the name of God, and there've been terrible bad things done in the name of communism and atheism. I don't think we can. I don't want to weigh them up.
I'll weigh them up.
You'll weigh them up and you'll say
no problem.
But then you have to go against this evidence that I've just stated.
Jordan, come back on this evidence.
Okay, so I didn't actually plan to pause it here, but so there's a lot there. And deflating atheism, I saw you smiling, so I do want to kick it to you first. But like one thing that strikes me, like whatever, regardless of what studies she's citing, like not all religions are created equal. So for example, if you're including Islam in all religions and then comparing that to just like purely secular states, which by and large are founded on a Christian ethic, it's like, well, of course you're going to have more violence there, but it's like that's just an equivocation that's just completely unreasonable.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of evidence that you have to kind of there are a lot of complicating factors. I mean, a lot of times they'll point to like Scandinavian countries which have an apparent lack of crime or something. Well, Scandinavian countries had state churches up until very recently, so it depends on what are the relevant aspects you want to consider. Also, I think I mentioned in my comment, kind of snarkily, that all those supposed enlightened blue states like Oregon and Washington, they're not looking too good these days. So yeah, maybe secular countries and secular states, and maybe they do kind of coast off of a Christian ethic, and then they're kind of like Wile E. Coyote going over the cliff.
Yeah, Braxton, how about you?
Yeah, I think some good stuff there, relevant stuff that I think he's right. I would also say that it's my understanding that a case can be made that some of these countries, and I'm not the guy to go to on these sort of foreign policy, political type discussions, but a lot of these countries are able to pour more money into other sorts of things like education, because America is basically policing much of the world and doing their job for them there. And so if America were to put an iron dome over ourselves and just pour all our money into these other things, it might look a little bit differently. But I think the fundamental point that needs to be brought out is what he said, which is simply that, and I think Peterson points this out later in the discussion, is that you are, number one, riding off of your Christian forebears. And I didn't know that there was a church government basically until recently, but that even furthers and defines the point. Lastly, I would say about that clip is that I thought, it was because of Jordan Peterson largely that I, over the past couple of years, have read both Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov and Crime and Punishment. And I have to tell you, you can hardly listen to a Jordan Peterson book. There they are. You can hardly listen to a Jordan Peterson discussion without him bringing up Crime and Punishment. He's also mentioned Brothers Karamazov. And Dostoevsky was said to have been a Christian, but like the worst one you'd ever meet. But I can tell you, in Crime and Punishment specifically, you see the depths of depravity and of guilt and shame. And if you want to read something that kind of impresses our moral categories and how they're there for people that don't think they're there, Crime and Punishment does a good job of illustrating that. But on this literary thread, Nietzsche, he's right about Nietzsche, and Sartre, of course, tried to talk. He was, a lot of the atheists today say, well, there's no intrinsic or ultimate meaning, but we can develop a meaning for ourselves and that sort of thing. That's going to be the thing that holds the building up whenever God has been ripped out from underneath it. But I just don't. There are multiple problems with that would require its own show. But I mean, first off, it's worthwhile to point out that people have different meanings that are in conflict with each other. And so the Judeo-Christian principles that people are running off of, even in some of these European countries that they're talking about, and they aren't even aware. The Christian principles that YouTube atheists are running off of, that they aren't even aware or will not admit, are Christian principles. We were just talking before the show started about Tom Holland, the historian who mentioned when he was on with N.T. Wright on Unbelievable, mentioned that this whole thing about there's something noble and honorable about being the person who is oppressed, that there's something heroic about being courageous in the midst of oppression. Yeah, that's a Christian thing. Back in the Roman Empire, you'd say, well, I'm being oppressed. Yeah, you're darn right you are, and you better realize that's your status in life. That is something that Christianity largely gave to the world. And so a lot of the fundamental drives and principles that we have and that atheists have come to us from Christianity. And I think that undergirds the point that he's making.
Yeah, that's great. And Dunphy, I will bring you in here in a minute, but I do need to finish playing the clip. I didn't plan to stop it there, but I want to finish playing it real quick before I make the points that I had written down.
I mean, obviously, from her perspective, Sue feels like actually we've got pretty stable societies that are increasingly secular these days. So perhaps Nietzsche was wrong, and in fact, we're not going to see this.
Well, I would say they're stable to the degree that they're actually not secular. And this is also a Nietzschean observation, and a Dostoevskian observation for that matter, is that we're living on the corpse of our ancestors, like we always have. That's a very old idea, but that stops being nourishing and starts to become rotten unless you replenish it. And I don't think we are replenishing it. We're in danger of we're living on borrowed time and in danger of running out of it. I think that the reason that the Western societies essentially work quite well is because they act out a Judeo-Christian ethic, and one that's essentially predicated on utmost regard for the sovereignty of the individual. So the individual is sovereign in relationship to the state, which is a remarkable idea and one that's fundamentally religious in its essence, in my mode of thinking, and that's also predicated on honest speech. And there's other predicates at all as well, but those are religious predicates in my estimation.
There's a section actually, Sue.
So there's a couple points. So first, when you talk about these studies, you can't just jump from all religious societies are worse than secular ones to specific ones within the United States, because specific ones within the United States, regardless of when you look at state by state, which ones proclaim higher belief or not, the entirety of the West is built on, for example, what Jordan Peterson talked about, the sovereignty of the individual, certain rights that are given by God and not by government. So to his point, the so-called secular states are stable to the point that they're not actually secular, that they are thriving on this. And one of my favorite lines that Jordan Peterson said, she's like, I don't want to count up the corpses between evil done in the name of religion versus evil done in the name of atheism. And Jordan Peterson's like, I'll stack them up. I will. And this is a criticism I hear often from the atheist types. They'll say, well, it's not fair to look at something like Stalin or these kinds of things because they were behaving in a quasi-religious manner, not a truly secular way. But this is where we get to the uncomfortable truth for the atheists, whether they like it or not. For Stalin, his atheism was an ism. It was a quasi-religion for him. And the point is that if there's no overarching moral authority, well, then guess what? His isms can be whatever they want it, whatever he wants them to be. And so he can use them to his point. And to what his point about Nietzsche is, purpose is built into us as part of our telos, right? We have to have a purpose. And if you strip a proper religious structure out from that, well, guess what? Then where the heck are we going to get our purposes? But I can tell you this, it's not going to be any place good. And because you can't just completely get rid of that instinct for purpose from humanity. And then real quick, last thing I'll say is, I realize there's an equivocation going on here to say religious societies are worse than atheist ones, because what the atheists want to do is they want to take Christianity and then throw it into the category of all the other religions like Islam, which, yes, of course, there's a lot more violence there. But then what they want to do is they want to steal from Christianity the good parts to build their secular societies on, and then say, well, look how good our secular societies are compared to the religious ones, but they're only good because they've stolen it from Christianity.
Excellent point.
Dunphy, I didn't let you speak last time. Do you want to go?
Yeah, so I wanted to address when she was, bringing up, America has the highest incarceration rates and all this good stuff. Bad stuff. So one, I don't think that's based on Judeo-Christian values. I think that's based on the American dream ethical system, which is legalism, which is do according to the law. And when it comes to actual virtue ethics, basic Aristotelian ideas of virtues like courage, temperance, candor, all those virtues that Aristotle talks about. People are not virtuous because it's not part of the law that they have to uphold. So they will get away with being evil almost, or viceful, when it suits their benefits. So friendship is not a virtue in America. That's mostly an Eastern tradition when you look at the medievals and the Greeks and so on. I think because of this, we get all these tragedies they talk about, because virtue ethics isn't held up and isn't at least taught to be valuable, while just upholding the law and living your own life and being your own God, almost your own idol, is a corruption of what I think the founding fathers wanted based on Judeo-Christian values. And I think that's what we have nowadays. And that's not Christianity or religion. That's just leaving the individual to themselves to make those decisions independent of truth and virtue and God, quite frankly.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I'm going to jump right into this next clip here. And this, to your point earlier, Rob, I think this is a good clip where Jordan Peterson's going beyond just it's a pragmatic way of acting to there's something objective in reality that serves as a foundation.
In Jordan's book, where he says this: Christianity elevated the individual soul, placing slave and master, commoner and nobleman alike on the same metaphysical footing, rendering them equal before God and the law. It's nothing short of a miracle. He has a very high view of what Christianity has done for the world, whether or not it's objectively true. What do you take from it?
Well, that evidence that I was discussing earlier, that there's plenty of now, that the most dysfunctional societies are also the most believing societies. There are lots of hypotheses about why that is the case. But I would like to challenge Jordan on the implication that he put before, that because a lot of these of our moral stance today comes from religion, and not all of it does, that it has to have that as a basis. I don't think it does. I feel very grateful to live in a country where now, at last, the majority are not religious. It's just tipped over in the latest polls. And in fact, coming up on the train from Devon today, I got chatting with various people. The assumption that I find here, I don't know what it's like in Canada, is I always start with assuming someone's an atheist, and it nearly always turns out to be there. Oh yeah, oh that religion stuff, it's very, very common in this country. Now, we have not descended into being a terrible country. We have, yes, we have our problems.
We're still fairly early on in the experiment, I suppose, of ditching God.
Like about 10 years.
Yes, I will await with interest and hope I live long enough to see. But then if we look at many of the Scandinavian countries, which are way ahead of us in that move, they have wonderful health systems, welfare state, support for people out of work, and so on.
I'd be really interested in hearing your response to all this then, Jordan. Ultimately, we can divorce the good principles that we may have had in some respects from religion ultimately, and still live perfectly happy secular
Well, it depends.
lives.
See, a lot of this depends on your definition of religion. Like, I know perfectly well from my own empirical studies that there's at least two disparate sets of phenomena that might be regarded as religious, right? There's the dogmatic element, which is really what Sue's referring to when she talks about the pathology of religious belief. And there's the spiritual element. And the dogmatic element tends to appeal to people who are essentially conservative in their temperamental nature. And I mean that scientifically speaking. And the meaningful element, the spiritual element, let's say, tends to appeal to people who are more liberal in their temperamental fundamentals. And religion overall is a continual dialogue between the dogmatic element and the spiritual element. And if either of those exceeds its proper boundaries, then there's a degenerative consequence. Like if the spiritual types get the upper hand, then the structure disappears. And if the dogmatic types get the upper hand, then everything clamps down into too much stasis. So to make a direct claim, say, between the existence of dogmatic belief and the pathology of society, and then to assume that that encompasses the entire relationship between religion and the functioning of society, I think is based upon an unfortunate narrowing of the definition of what constitutes religious. But then back to the idea that our moral claims can be divorced from the religious substrate. It depends on what you mean, and here we go with the definition, by moral substrate, or religious substrate. Let's say that I regard you as a sovereign individual. Well, the question is, what does that mean? It might just be an opinion, might just be a meme, might be reflective of something far deeper, so deep that if we transgress against it, it will be fatal. And my investigations have convinced me that that's exactly the case, that although it may be a rational claim, it may be an enlightenment claim as well, that there's something underneath it that's so much deeper than that to reduce it to mere rationality or to mere enlightenment claim is to do it an immense disservice. And also to fall prey, I would say, to the postmodern quandary, because the postmodern quandary is all belief systems are equally invalid. It's something like that. And that's a real problem when you try to erect a belief system on purely rational axioms. So, and you can't, besides that, you can't even do it. It's like, I don't respect you as an individual for rational means. The rationality didn't precede my respect for you. It's way deeper than that.
So that's what I really like that clip from Jordan Peterson, because here he's saying it's not just an opinion. It's not just based on rationality. There's something far, far deeper than that. But so Braxton, I do want to turn it over to you first.
Yeah, and Rob hasn't gotten to speak in a while, so he should get a chance here, I think. But I think going back to what do we mean by religion, right? Because I actually know, and this is a pretty shallow point, but I think it's a meaningful one. When we're talking about the general population, if I polled a church on Sunday morning, let's take a non-denominational evangelical church on Sunday morning and ask them, are they religious? I would get people back who are very committed to that church who would say they are not religious. And the reason they would say they are not religious is because, at least in the United States and in that sort of a church, religion, there's been so much of this, and I'm sorry, nonsense about it's a relationship, not a religion. Well, those two things are not mutually exclusive. And I think the person wants to say that because they hear the term religion and they think that it somehow is a negative or denigrating term, or puts Christianity on par with other false religions or something like that. But the reality is, it is a religion. Christianity is a religion. It does involve a relationship, but it is a religion. But because of things like that, you won't even get all Christians to put down that they're religious. On top of that, there are people who believe that Christianity is true, and yet aren't a part of a local assembly. Whatever we want to say about the status of their salvation or whether they're in Christ, that person might put that they're not religious. I'm sorry, not all of the nuns are not religious. And that's an important thing. So those things, I think, need to be stated as well. But then on the point that he keeps coming back to, and I think was the real thing you wanted to comment on, which is whether this substrate here is, if it seems like it goes much deeper, and he's found in his thinking about it that it does go much deeper. And of course, the four of us would say it does go much deeper and grounded in the nature of God and all those kind of things. But the reality is, she is still very much experiencing the residue of Christianity, which is a major thrust in this video. She is experiencing that residue of Christianity that keeps things rolling so far. Now, here's the thing. I don't know if it was in this clip or the last one, but I did want to say something about it, where he says we are living off of the corpse of our forebears, and if we don't continue to feed that or fuel that, it's going to run out. And I think we are seeing, even though America is seen to be much more of a Christian nation than some of the European countries are. And I think that that's true when we're talking about Christendom, for sure, and probably true in reality. But even here, we're seeing that fuel begin to run out. I mean, the secularists won't recognize this, and liberal Christians and progressive Christians won't recognize this. But what we're seeing happen to our understanding of human sexuality and gender and the value of the unborn and all of these kind of things are strong evidences that Judeo-Christian values, as that fuel begins to run out in terms of its cultural currency, we're seeing the society come apart at the seams. And guess what? Even if you think that Christianity is bunk, then you should recognize that a good historical analysis will show you that for the strength of a nation, for the strength of a culture and its survivability, you need the strength of a traditional family unit. It can't just be any kind of family unit, the strength of a family unit. And these things that we're seeing with these social issues, where it is coming apart at the seams, and I think there are other issues aside from social issues, but it's most pronounced there, is all hitting at the family unit. And so, yeah, that fuel is beginning to run out. And unless you recognize you don't get to just have a subjective meaning and a subjective morality, and we can all agree, and it's going to be like some sort of a liberal or atheist utopia. I'm sorry, no. You need to recognize the truth of the matter. And by the way, this is the only way you can really have a truth of the matter in the sense that we're talking about, is that this is deep, as he's saying, and we would say divine, ultimately, in its foundation.
Yeah. Mr. Lithgow.
Well, there's a lot here to address.
Yeah, the clips coming up are much shorter.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I mean, what Braxton brought up, I think you could even improve on that, because, I mean, you brought up things like abortion, things that I'm very much opposed to, but you can also bring up things that are putatively liberal values, like the value of free speech and the value of political assembly. And we're seeing even things like those topple. I think it's without this metaphysical framework that Jordan Peterson alludes to, and that, like, as we said, it's not just the propositions of Christianity, it's the whole metaphysical framework of, as he mentions, like the sovereignty of the individual. You can, once you pull those out, even those liberal values like free speech, even those can't stand. Now, just kind of going back to the kind of longer discussion about religion, I really don't have much interest in defending religion in general or in the abstract. I'm much more interested in just like, belief in God, because a religion, that's for a sociologist to define. So, I mean, I'm not going to say that, a religion is necessarily a good thing. It could be, a loyalty to Stalin or something. So,
Sure. Dumpy.
Yeah, I find people who say it's a relationship, not a religion, even though it's a religion that involves a relationship, but on a much grander scale. I like Augustine's quote that God is the greatest romance, the greatest human adventure, the greatest human achievement once it's fulfilled. But typically they fall under one category where it's this inch-deep faith where they've had this religious or emotional experience, and the idea of God has helped them, and therefore they have a relationship. And it's not questioned, it's not open, and doubts are shamed. And then on the other side, you have these Christians who I've talked to where they have much knowledge, much head knowledge, but aren't wise with it. And then, you talk to them about many things about God, even philosophy of time, and then out of nowhere, they make very, very decisions that are against what they affirm they believe. Going back to what Jordan Peterson at the very beginning was talking about, do we really believe what we believe? Because your actions show what you actually believe and your real moral choices. And I find a lot of Christians don't have the best foundation of what faith is. And there was a quote, J. Warner Wallace, I saw posted where faith that can't be trusted isn't faith at all, or faith to be trusted. And I've seen many Christians who have that, and we call them lukewarm. And I think it's because of this combination of legalism and the sovereignty of the individual. Now, I believe in the sovereignty of the individual, and I think God has given everyone, it's called libertarian free will. But I think we emphasize that too much and do not say, hey, go to truth, virtue, and obviously God, since I believe God, and all truth is God's truth, and go to that to make your moral decisions, because there's a hidden assumption, I think, in Western culture where it's this idea of progression, where as time goes out, knowledge obviously progresses, and old thinkers, we don't need them anymore. C.S. Lewis has a great essay called Old Books, I believe, where he talks about the great philosophers. And I've been reading Aristotle lately, and they say so much, and you can just see where the problem is with many people in their struggles when you just read Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. And when you get into the problem of temperance and self-indulgence versus insensibility, and people can't find the middle ground between those vices, and they try and create their own, and that's what ends up being even worse. But I think a lack of old books and old readers and taking considerations into that leads to a lot of the problems that Jordan Peterson and I think Susan in her name have been talking about. And because they keep going with this presupposition, I don't think they will get very far or much common ground, in my view.
Yeah, I want to jump back. This is another point I wanted to make. And she's talking about she lives in this highly secular society, and in her view, everything is just coming up roses. Well, that's a very lazy claim to make when you're living in a largely comfortable middle class society. It's very easy to say, oh well, we can all construct our own ethics. That's very easy to say because most people are just going to do the risk reward analysis and say, well, it just behooves me just to go along with the rules and not create any waves. But how is that person going to act in the time of crisis? That's when your foundational beliefs are going to be put to the test. So I don't really have any respect for a person who lives in a comfortable middle class or upper middle class milieu who says, oh, I can construct my own net. Look, I'm not murdering and raping, so well, yeah, that's because it doesn't benefit you to do that. But how are you going to act in the time of crisis? And I think looking at world events, that time of crisis might be coming sooner rather than later.
I think you're right. I think people, and I think a great example is this George Floyd case. And look what happened. Our entire country went crazy over one man's injustice, but everything has gone normal. It's almost like that Joker line from The Dark Knight when he's talking to Harvey Dent. Take out one little mayor, everyone loses, everyone goes insane. But people are killed every day, and abortions happen every day, and that doesn't bat an eye for many people. And
Absolutely.
I think it's because of the culture and postmodern society we live in, where things just go normal, and then when actual moral decisions come up, you haven't had that experience, and you just fail miserably, and then you keep following those same choices. And I think it's because people follow impulses based on their own subjectivity because we've influenced the sovereignty of the individual too much. And when they go off that impulse, it just creates disaster. And people don't actually care about truth and wisdom, virtue, and all these good things that God has given, and distort those in their misplaced judgments and so on.
You know, I just want to jump in. I know we need to move on, but you said a mouthful there, John. I agree 100% with that comment. And it's a difficult one to make with precision right now because everyone's emotions and passions are up, and with good reason. Look, what happened to George Floyd is a horrific nightmare and should not have happened. And I realize that we want to recognize the importance of what that means in this time and in this place for African Americans. And so I don't want to detract from that, but at the same time, I do want to say to the leftists who are pro-choice, who are making that point, I just want to say back, like, look, I'm glad to hear that you feel this way about the taking of life unjustly. That's a great start. Now, can you help us out with the millions that die from abortion? And that, again, I didn't even know if I should say this because I don't want to detract or use that as a jumping off point to talk about this. That needs to be talked about. The issues of race need to be talked about on their own merits, and that is true. But for this discussion where we're talking about these meta issues, that is, I don't know how one cannot put the two together and say, look, millions are dying. This is an issue that deserves that attention too. So I know I haven't really said anything too profound there. Just to echo what John says, that's my now northern way of saying amen, as I would have said in the South.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, even if we don't go all the way to abortion, which I think we should, I mean, that's one of the issues I'm very outspoken about. But even if we say George Floyd, look, like everybody left, right, and center was against that, said, no, that's evil, that shouldn't have happened. But then all of a sudden when it's a black cop being killed by white Antifa, well, we're not going to get in an uproar about that. Or even now the black toddlers who are being killed by Black Lives Matter activists. It's like, we're just ignoring that. And it's because it's for political things. And again, you strip the religious underpinnings out from people and then give them a purpose to fight for. It's like, this is what happens.
On that. Nevertheless, we are happiness-seeking creatures, and I have found through practice and growing older that acting gratitude, thinking gratitude, feeling gratitude makes me happier and seems to kind of rub off on other people.
So I don't think we are happiness-seeking creatures, and I think it's a low goal. Not because there's something wrong with being happy, because, thank God if you get to be happy now and then. But I don't think that that's what we seek. I think we seek a meaning that's deep enough to sustain us through tragedy. And that is way different.
Do you know, when I hit tragedy is too strong a word. I think, but when horrible things happen to me, or I feel, or I read some terrible thing going on in the world, yes, those are tragedies going on in the world. My response is, nothing matters. It's all empty and meaningless. This is how the world is. Get used to it. Get on with it, girl.
That sounds like a very Zen Buddhist way of dealing.
I guess it is.
Meaning.
Well, it's a paradoxical way, though. Because
it is paradoxical.
The first part of that is nihilistic, and the second part isn't. So how do you reconcile those two things? Why get on with it, girl?
Because well, here's another thing. I've often done this with my students. Let's suppose you become nihilistic. Nothing matters. There's no point in doing it. I mean, I think we live in a pointless universe. What are you going to do? And I say to them, like William James in his wonderful thing about getting up in the morning, but that's a slightly different point that he makes there. But I say to them, okay, tomorrow morning, when you wake up, think it's all pointless. There's no point in doing anything. Now, what are you going to do? Well, actually, you're going to need to go to the loo. You're going to get out of bed and you're going to go to the bathroom. And when you're there, you'll think, actually, I'm hungry. I think I want to go down to the kitchen. I probably should put my slippers on. Why don't I get dressed? You go and have something to eat. And then you think, I'm bored. And you go to university and get into your lectures. And, we are not creatures who will just not do anything.
Exactly, because as William Lane Craig points out, we can't live consistently. Atheists don't live consistently with their atheism. And to something we were mentioning earlier, she says her naturalism isn't naturalism that explains everything, but that's a very positive claim that we do in fact live in a very pointless and meaninglessness. Or I think they might have said the wrong universe, but either way, Braxton, yeah.
Oh, I just thought that was a very honest expression of the conclusions of her position. But I think what it leads to is what you just pointed out, which is in the end, I do have this drive for purpose. Now we can give it to her on the going to the bathroom, right? If we put on our naturalistic lenses, I mean, okay, I personally don't want to experience myself urinating on myself. So I'm going to go to the bathroom. I'm hungry. So yeah, I'm going to go have some Fruit Loops or whatever they eat in Great Britain. But at the same time, I'm going to go to university now because I'm bored. Hold on. You just jumped way down the track. Why are you going to go to university? That's much bigger than handling a carnal urge like eating or going to the bathroom. You're going to learn concepts because of what? Because there's some drive to do something meaningful. Otherwise, you wouldn't do that. And so what we do here is we say, look, a couple of ways about this. One, that seems like some evidence right there that you do have this sort of teleological drive toward purpose, and that requires its own explanation. But simply put, we could say something more. We could say, we could borrow Richard Swinburne's principle of credulity that he uses in his argument from religious experience and say, look, you have this, you find in yourself this seemingness that you have purpose. It seems undeniable. That seems undeniable. Now, look, whether you take evolution or you're a young earth creationist out there or whatever you are, when I look at this hand, however this hand got to be a hand, it clearly has a purpose for gripping things. My mouth clearly has a purpose for breathing and eating and talking. And those are some of my favorite things to do. When it comes to eating and talking, I'm a satisfied customer. My legs were clearly designed that I could walk around. They have a telos. They have a purpose. That there seems to be, and it seems impossible to deny that I am built with purpose. Okay, if I have that sort of a seemingness, then I am justified to maintain that is the case until someone presents me with an argument that has premises that are more plausible, because a good argument has premises that are plausible, more likely to be true than false. You need to present me with an argument that has premises that are more plausible to me than my immediate experience of purpose. And it's difficult to imagine such an argument with force like that. So I would say all of that unpacked from not the going to the bathroom, not the eating of the Great Britain style Fruit Loops, but I'm going to go to university now, because there I think you jumped way down the track.
Yeah, Mr. Deflating Atheism. I knew you had gone away, but she essentially had made the argument, we aren't just creatures.
Braxton, you did. I loved everything you said. I don't really have a whole lot to say except to say that her worldview is horrible, and it seems like her whole what would be a morality is just avoidance of suffering, and so I think it's basically comfort for her. And so if that's the highest good in her view, I would say why not just have a universal euthanasia? I mean, if we're avoiding suffering. So yeah, I don't. There are deeper levels on which you can attack it, but yeah, it just seems like it's a horrible worldview to me. And I'm sure she would look at the couch potato who simply goes to the loo and eats his British Fruit Loops. I'm sure she would look at him with complete contempt, if that's all he does. So I think she, at some level, does feel that human beings need purpose too.
Yeah, Dunphy.
So I find it interesting, go to college if you're bored. I think if you have two people who are able to go to college and one is able to make a faster decision about what they want to do than the other person decides not to go to college, you clearly know that the one person who goes to that college has a sense of identity and purpose. They want to do something with their life, not getting into metaphysics, whether, God exists and whether that's pointless or, has some sort of meaningful in God's, purpose for your life and whatnot. And the person who doesn't go and sits around wondering, what am I going to do with my life? And almost deep down, they have this sort of nihilistic tendency and they don't show it to others. They don't know what they want to do with their life because they don't have a sense of identity. They almost have to find their identity in others. And I think people who go to college understand education is very important. And when you have that value, you have a value in yourself and I think a sense of dignity. But I'm going back to God. I think, most certainly if atheism is true, then nihilism is true. But I know many Christians who are nihilists, and I think if we went to old books, we'd find many solutions and not make assumptions, meaning, oh, they clearly didn't have answers in the past because we were thinking about it more since we progressed more. No, I think Aristotle, one of his virtues is candor, and that is how I described as realistic with reason. On the one hand, you have the what's the word for being over hopeful or over joyful for no reason? Huh? Oh yeah, over optimistic, and then you have complete nihilistic. While if you're candor, the middle ground between the two, you realize that there are tough realities even in Christianity. You're going to go through certain struggles, and it is just going to happen. But with your reason, you can realize, those emotions are a good thing, and there's purpose to them. They aren't the truth makers, meaning you're over optimistic and that becomes your worldview, or there's no reason, there's no truth vindicating in them, which would be the nihilist, where like emotions just don't have any play whatsoever, even though the entire worldview is based off a sense of lack of hope and almost no rationality to it whatsoever. If you're a Christian, if you're an atheist, then that's justified. But I think candor is, from Aristotle, a good solution to this middle ground, whether to be over optimistic or to be over nihilistic. Well, you can almost combine the two and realize, you're going to go through times of pain, and while you feel like there's no hope, but rationally speaking, no, you're no hope, since there is evidence that Jesus rose from the dead and is God, and so on and so forth. I know that in spite of a religious experience. But I've said my fair share, I guess.
Yeah, if you don't have a sense of purpose, how are you going to endure struggle?
Yeah.
Me to go through that process, which I've done in the past a lot, and it's just natural now, is a very positive way of living, to accept the meaningless and ultimate emptiness of everything, and accept that this creature here, this thing, this evolved creature just will get on with life.
But you're not accepting the meaninglessness of it, even by going through those actions that you
described.
Don't think so? Not at all, because you're acting as if those things are meaningful.
Yes, I am. I'm
right.
acting as though those things are
meaningful. Pretending that they're meaningful?
Pardon?
Are you pretending that they're meaningful?
No, I'm not pretending. My way of putting it would be that those meanings are constructed by myself and others.
They're personal.
And they're because the kind of creatures we are, because of the mean
but they're not constructed.
I'd like to see
Hunger
Jordan's
isn't constructed. Neither is your desire to use the loo. None of that's constructed.
No. But the fact that there is a loo is part of culture.
Yeah, well, thank God for that. Yeah. But see,
thank God, would you for that? Sorry, that's a poor joke.
Well, you see, so imagine this. You have the proximal meanings that you described that are sort of a priori, right? Yeah. They're handed to you. You might consider them as needs or drives, although they're not. They're personalities. It's not the right way of conceptualizing them. But then there's the intermingling of all those needs and drives, let's say, and that constitutes a new layer of structure, because it isn't just that you have to eat and that you have to use the washroom and that you have to have something to drink and that you have to be warm enough or cool enough to survive. It's that you have to do all those things at the same time in a situation where you're going to have to propagate that across time. And you're going to have to do it with a bunch of other people. And it's always been like that. And so what that means is that out of those proximal meanings, higher meanings arise. And you might say, well, those meanings are arbitrary. And I would think those are religious meanings.
I wouldn't say they are arbitrary, but I would say they were constructed. It's very interesting. Reading your book.
What do you mean by constructed?
Well, they are a consequence of mimetic evolution, of the language that people are brought up in, the culture they live in, the arguments they have. I mean,
what about the...
So... Real quick, so Rob, I'll kick it over to you first, but real quick, I want to say something. To your point earlier, Braxton, when you kind of distinguish certain like biological desires, like to eat or whatever, from deeper purpose, I think, yes, obviously there's a distinction between them, but like what William Lane Craig points about morality, which is like if we trust our experience of the external world, we're no less justified in trusting our experience of a moral realm. And so, yes, in the same way, I think we're just as justified to trust, obviously, certain biological drives and then our drive towards certain purposes, but she make this argument that it is meaningless, but this body won't just do nothing. This body just will do things. Well, going by that logic, well, Hitler's evolutionary process led to him, and he wouldn't just do nothing. He would find his purpose in what he carried out, or Stalin what he would carry out. And then back to the point you made earlier about, well, what are you going to do if you wake up and you're a nihilist and you decide things meaningless? You're going to go to the little, and then maybe you'll go to university. Well, maybe not. Maybe you'll take your own life, because people do that all of the time who decide life is meaningless. I keep messing up that word for some reason. But yeah, sorry, Mr. Deflating Atheism.
I don't really have a whole lot to add to that. I think Jordan Peterson was actually building a more profound point than I was expecting at that point. But yeah, it seems like she wants to be the woman who doesn't believe in purpose, who is inhabiting the structures of people who did, and that doesn't really work in the long term.
Braxton.
Yeah, I think it was a clear point. It strikes me that, and I don't mean this as an insult to Jordan Peterson, because I love Jordan Peterson, but I think he is saying in an eloquent and highbrow way what Christian apologists are saying in some of the most basic books about ultimate foundations and morality and meaning and things like that. It's and it's great because it's getting to a different audience, but this is something that we've all said. Everyone on the screen right now has said probably for years. So it's music to my ears.
Senor Dunphy.
Yeah, I think it's been overdone quite a lot. Not even in this podcast, but atheists are living inconsistent. Yes, I agree. Like, epistemologically speaking, but yeah, I would agree. I think she's just having her cake, just like many atheists. But yeah.
Biology that they're given.
Well, we start with the biology, and the memes build on top of that.
Nah, the memes are biology too.
Well, by definition, they are. Well,
see, this is the thing.
I would follow Dawkins in saying, well, talk about genes as biology, talk about memes as culture. That's all I meant by dividing that. But let me say this.
Yeah, but I don't accept that division.
But I want to get back to what we're saying about meaning. Reading your book made me think a lot about what you mean by meaning, and your claim that we should have a meaningful life or strive for a meaningful life, that meaningfulness is important. And I kept asking myself, do I live that way? What meanings does my life have? And, if I think of something like, well, most of my striving goes into writing my books. And is that meaningful? And again, I have the same response when I ask myself that question. It's just what this body does.
Then you should listen to the body and stop listening to the thing that's criticizing it.
And what would the body say?
It would say, write your book and try to be as clear as you possibly can about it.
That's what I do. And that's exactly what I do.
What I said at the beginning is that the atheist types act out a religious structure and criticize it.
No religious structure.
So that's one of my favorite lines from Jordan Peterson, because it's just like 2 sentences, but it's so profound, which is like, you have this instinct. Like if I had an experience of the external world, but then I had a worldview that told me it was an illusion, well, I should probably think there's something wrong with the worldview. And it's the same thing here. It's like she has all these instincts and drives towards certain purposes, but then has a worldview. You could say it's the same thing with morality or free will, right? Like we make free choices, we experience a moral realm, but then the naturalist just has this worldview that says, no, those things don't exist. It's like, well, maybe something's wrong with your worldvieue. But Braxton, I'll give it to you first.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, this is where I could almost be a bit of an idealist, though I'm not, into saying that, look, the things that we have most direct access to are our experiences, are the qualia that we have. I mean, we have that direct access to our impressions of things. The external world are the things that we have access to via our senses. And that's why we always, in these worldview discussions, end up getting back to, how do you know you're not a brain in a vat? But the things that we have most direct access to are the things that we should be most confident in. And her impressions about morality and meaning and all those kinds of things, she has direct access to that. So they should count for something. And this is one of the things that I get so frustrated about with these worldview discussions, which is there is such a reliance on empiricism and on science and scientism, whether it is ever explicitly that or not. So that to the degree that we exclude experience and intuition as relevant guides for truth. I liked how, I know you've had Trent Doherty on here before. In his discussion with T-Jump, he said, Yeah, sometimes things aren't what they seem to be, but most of the time they are. That's a really good point. Like it's not. Yeah, our intuitions can be flawed; they can lead us astray. Our strongly held impressions that certain things are true can lead us astray, but they're not always that way, and we shouldn't necessarily give them the default of distrusting them. So yeah, she walks around in the physical world. She sees this physical world. She functions in it, and she takes it all to be more or less the way things are. Well, in the world of her first-person conscious experience, she shouldn't necessarily distrust everything as well, and it should count for something.
Absolutely, yeah, Mr. Lithgow.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to say. You were so okay. So yeah, we can be skeptical about things that we do have direct access to, but that defeater would in turn have to be something that we have direct access to. We can't have some abstract principle to defeat our experiences. So it kind of reminds me of like somebody who criticized like a limitivist materialism and say, okay, you're constructing a mental model to disprove the mind that's constructing the model. It's completely inside-out thinking, but those are the kind of contradictions that naturalism is going to lead you to. Now, when I look at this woman, it just seems very, very distasteful to me because I think she's a writer. She has a pretty comfortable life, and so writing is what puts a roof over her head. And so she could just say, "Well, it's my body. I just want to write." Well, that's very easy for her to say, and so I don't really have a whole lot of respect for what she's saying.
Dunphy, I see you're typing. Would you like to add anything before I play the next clip?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
Let me get to this question because
Yes,
I did want to get to this because
Right.
you have a fascinating part in your book, Jordan, where you do say this. You're simply not addressing atheists. You say you're simply not an atheist in your actions. And it is your actions.
Or if you are, look out.
And it is your actions that most accurately reflect your religious beliefs. What do you mean by that? Why are you saying that no one is really an atheist deep down?
I didn't say no one was.
Okay.
I said that most of the people who claim to be atheists aren't. So this is why I like Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, because Raskolnikov tried to act like an atheist, right? He took the ideas that were floating around. Dostoevsky took the ideas that were floating around in the late 1800s, which are still the ideas that we're discussing today. One most fundamental idea, I suppose, being after Nietzsche's announcement of the death of God, that if there is no God, then anything is permitted. That was Raskolnikov. Raskolnikov's the criminal in Crime and Punishment, the murderer. He gets away with his murder, technically, but not psychologically. And he decides that if there's no God, anything is permitted.
But
And
this
he can't
doesn't
see a
have to be
reason.
true. That's a person in a character in a novel. I don't think that that's so.
Well, let's hear the end of that story. And what do you take away from what Dostoevsky has to say about?
Well, Dostoevsky's takeaway was that there was a moral law that Raskolnikov was breaking, even though he rationalized his way through it. Like he committed the perfect murder, right? He murdered a woman who people would have voted to murder, and then he got away with it. And he did it for good reasons, at least reasons that he could rationalize as good. And then he got away with it, but it destroyed his soul. And Dostoevsky's right about that. And one of the things I like about Dostoevsky as compared to Nietzsche, say, because I think Dostoevsky is the profounder of the two, is that in the Brothers Karamazov, for example, Ivan is the atheist, and Ivan is everything you'd want a man to be, like seriously. And Dostoevsky, man, he doesn't straw man his opponents. The most powerful characters in his books are always the opponents of what he himself believes. And Ivan is always arguing with Alyosha, who's his younger brother, who's a monastic novitiate and really can't articulate himself very well, has nowhere near the force or charisma of Ivan. But Alyosha wins the drama, even though he loses all the arguments. And that's where Dostoevsky is so great. It's like, and this is what you're doing in your life. You're acting out the logos, Susan. That's what you're doing. You're writing books to illuminate the world.
Yes.
You say,
And
well, I
that's
don't
not
believe
coming
in
from
that.
a
It's like,
place
yes, you
of
do.
meaninglessness.
Don't you think it's kind of offensive to say to me that I'm not an atheist when I am? Why don't answer me this question? Why do you think I don't go around murdering people?
Because you were raised in modern Christendom. But Mr. Deflating Atheism, let me kick it to you first.
I don't have a whole lot to say about that. Yeah. I just think what she's saying is ridiculous.
Okay, well, Braxton.
Yeah, so in the Crime and Punishment, for those that haven't read it, the guy does carry out, I wouldn't call it the perfect murder. He just got really lucky. But he has this woman that he tries to she's like a loan shark basically. He goes, or she's like a pawn shop. He goes to her apartment and he gives her things that he gets money in return for, and that sort of thing. And it comes into his head one day, hey, I could kill her. She's got all this money and all this stuff in there. I could kill her and take all her stuff, and nobody would ever know because I could do it in the middle of the night and blah, blah, blah. Nobody likes her anyway. And so that's what he does. He almost gets caught by dumb luck. He gets out of it. And so he's safe. But then incredible paranoia and incredible guilt to the point that he just stays in his bed all the time, and people are trying to help him and give him money and he tries to get drunk and nothing will help, and he's just tormented. That's why I said earlier in the show, that is a great example of the depths of depravity. And it seems, frankly, and I don't have anything against this woman. I'm sure she's a lovely person in real life, but it's just an oafish response to say back, well, but that's a novel. Well, okay, it is a novel, but you're telling me there aren't people like this in real life? Of course there are. So, I mean, it's a powerful, powerful narrative. Now, what she seems to miss, that I think is very important in Jordan Peterson, she gets personally offended that he's saying that many of the people that claim to be atheists aren't atheists. But that's because she's thinking that what he means by that, despite his having clarified it earlier, is that he doesn't believe that she intellectually, consciously considers herself to be an atheist. What he means is she doesn't live like an atheist. That's why just a few moments earlier in the video, he says, and I don't remember how he put it, but yeah, we better hope they aren't really atheists.
He said, or if they are, look out.
Right. And that's an important thing in one sense, it's one of the great things about Jordan Peters' conversations and his thinking is that there are layers to it. One of the most frustrating thing is that there are layers, and you have to kind of learn how he communicates and what he thinks before you can unpack what he's actually trying to say. But I think that's a great example of where she tripped through and got offended at what she thought he meant, when I think he would say, yeah, of course I think you believe you're an atheist, but you don't live like an atheist.
Yeah. And I want to make a point. We talked about this before we started the show, a brilliant point Stephen Crowder makes. So she could just say, well, why do you think I don't go around murdering people? And this is an example atheists love to do as well. If you found out tomorrow God didn't exist, would you just run around raping and pillaging and doing all these things? And that's a very obvious example. And, we know as apologists, we often argue, well, you don't need, say, God or the Bible to know murder is wrong, right? That's written on your heart. We have certain instincts, but she could have asked the question instead of murdering, well, why do you think I go around forgiving people that have wronged me or showing mercy? Because guess what? For most of human histories and in most of societies, that was not seen as virtue. That is unique to modern Christendom. And that's because of the Bible, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. So that is a very uniquely Christian idea. And so to some extent, yeah, you do need a book to tell you that those things are wrong.
Yeah, and on those points, and Rob, I see that you're about to say something. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I want to say real quickly, this may surprise people, but right now I'm in the middle of the most recent prequel to The Hunger Games, the book, and there's a great line in it where the main character, who is President Snow from the films, and he says something about the Hunger Games. He's thinking about the barbarism of it and just how awful it is and the depravity and all these kind of things. And he muses in his thoughts about how if you just create certain cultural suggestions and you make them normative and you make them acceptable by kind of watering down and normalizing this sort of behavior, ultimately you can get a culture to do something like this. And I feel a bit like Susan Blackmore would say to me, oh, but that's a novel. Again, with the oafish response, I think my response would be, okay, but we have had that in the history of the world, something very much like the Hunger Games, right? So it just goes to show that, and this connects to the main theme that we've been discussing, which is, right, you wouldn't start doing horrific things tomorrow if you came to believe that God doesn't exist necessarily, because you live in a culture that has been infused with the suggestions of Christianity. But if you grew up in Panem or in ancient Rome or whatever, you very well could do these horrific things or allow for them or enjoy them because the culture allowed for that.
Very good point. I was going to ask a question to people who maybe study Jordan Peterson a little more than I do. So Jordan Peterson is here asserting that she's still using a sort of Christian metaphysical framework. So when Jordan Peterson says that he acts out Christianity, is he saying it in that minimal way that Susan Blackmore is acting out Christianity, or is it something more?
I think, and I think that's in the last clip. I think he's saying, yes, there is something more, because I think he does believe that there's a marriage of the two, that it's not just something pragmatic, that the very reason that when we act those things out, you can say more or less you have a good outcome, is because there's something fundamental built into reality. So I do think he goes further than I'm just acting it out because it's pragmatic. But the reason acting out the pragmatic thing will work is because there's something underpinning reality.
Gotcha.
All right. So yeah, we only have 2 more clips here. Each are only a minute long. So
just come back to this, because I want to hear why ultimately, despite everything that Sue said there, you still think she's behaving as though there is, in some sense, a God or some ultimate meaning, even though she protests that no, that's
well, I would say she's acting it out. Well, for example, the act of writing a book. I mean, the Judeo-Christian culture is the culture of the book. It's the revelation of the proper mode of being in written form. It's not only that, but it's a large part of that. It's the culture of the book. You're acting out the culture of the book. It's thousands of years old. And the true voice in the culture of the book is the logos. That's what it is, technically speaking. And so she's acting out the logos and writing a book. It's like, and then she says, well, I don't believe in God. It's like, okay, that's fine.
The logos, of
acting
course,
like you do is fine.
In scripture, in the New Testament, is
the word
is brought into the word, and it of course relates
the word
to
that brings order out of chaos,
and to Jesus Christ as the sort of personification almost of that.
Right. He's the archetypal manifestation of the logos.
I mean,
yeah, and real quick, but Jordan Peterson, by the way, wouldn't say Christ is merely an archetypal representation of that. I mean, Gary Habermas has talked to me about that before, that, Jordan Peterson is very open to there being more behind Jesus. But to the point Peterson just made, I thought this was a great overlay to put on. John 1:1-3, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and apart from him, nothing came into being that has come into being. And that's Jordan Peterson's point. He's like, and that's what you're acting out in your life, is the logos, particularly with someone who writes books for a living. So I thought that was great.
Yeah, real quick, this isn't directly related, except that it has to do with his understanding of Christ. And I just want to share this because it's the most meaningful thing I've ever heard Jordan Peterson say. He said it on Joe Rogan's show, and he was talking about the archetype of the hero. And he says, if you take all of the best qualities that the best people share, and you boiled those down into one person, that would be your archetypal hero, right? That's a hero character. And then if you took all of the heroes who have ever lived and took the best qualities, leaving the worst, took the best qualities out of those heroes and boiled them down into one central figure, that's Christ. He's a meta hero. And I just thought, I get right now, as I just said it, I get the prickly, what do you call them? Goosebumps, or whatever, because that is just powerful to me. And every Christian should think so, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, Mr. Fling Nathan, did you want to say anything?
Imagine telling your 2005 self that one of the most profound things you ever heard was said on a Joe Rogan podcast.
I would know instantly it didn't come from Joe.
Yeah.
Poor Joe. No, one of the things, if you saw the dialogue, I can't remember the one, Rebecca Goldstein, I think it was, and William Lane Craig and Jordan Peterson all had a dialogue on meaning. And I thought one of the things Jordan Peterson said kind of along the same lines is he had a dream. And so I think God is really speaking to Jordan, but Jordan said he had a dream where there was all the great kings of the past, and then all of a sudden they all bowed down to the figure of Christ, because even like the greatest kings need someone to bow down to. And to me, that was really profound. Jordan has some, for someone who is not a standard, apologist, he has some really profound points that I think a lot of apologists could really latch on to.
A book that everyone should read, should have to read, is the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. And I think in a lot of ways, I think Jordan Peterson reminds me of a Benjamin Franklin type character, deistic as he was. Of course, to my mind, it's still somewhat ambiguous how to define Jordan Peterson, but he really reminds me of Franklin.
Yeah, sorry, I was just fast forwarding the video. So this is the very last clip we shall play.
Separation of church and state in one sentence. So there's a miracle for you.
We're going to go for a final question. I'm going to ask it for both of you, which is the question we began with. We're talking about the psychology of belief. Do we need God to make sense of life? Your 1 minute answer begins now, Sue.
Absolutely not. That will do for an answer.
Okay. Do we need God to make sense of life, Jordan?
Well, God is what you use to make sense of your life, by definition. This is one of the things I learned from Jung. The highest value, you have a hierarchy of values. You have to. Otherwise, you can't act, or you're painfully confused. You have a hierarchy of values. Whatever is at the top of that hierarchy of values serves the function of God for you. Now, it may be a God that you don't believe in, or a God that you can't name, but it doesn't matter, because it's God for you. And what you think about God has very little impact on how God is acting within you, whatever God it is that you happen to be, let's say, following.
It's been fascinating.
So there's a way to understand that. I really like this, because I think this comes very back to the beginning of the first clip we played, when Jordan Peterson said, by no means are our beliefs transparent to us. Because there's a way to understand what Jordan just said as more of a kind of idolatry type of thing. Like, well, if my highest value is this pen, then this pen is God for me. Or if this mug of water or this book, is my highest value, then that's God for me. And that can almost sound like, again, this kind of just pragmatic thing. But going back to, I think what he's pointing out is actually, no, it's just not transparent to us that at some level, if you go deep enough, we are worshiping, say, the Christian God, in the sense that we're obeying our telos, which was built in by that God, so that God is the ultimate foundation, and we're obeying that telos. It's just not transparent to us by any means that the values that we're obeying or living our lives by are built on that foundation.
I think you're speaking to general revelation that we can see within ourselves about the truth of reality. But I want to go back to something that I think Rob said earlier in the episode, which is that I think that everything you said is true and it's beautiful. I think there are still propositional truth claims that need to be held for someone to be, in a meaningful sense, an Orthodox Christian, to be a Christian. And it makes me think of the statement that is often attributed to St. Francis Assisi, but it's my understanding that you can't demonstrate that Francis Assisi ever said this. And based on what we know about his life, it's unlikely that he would have said this, as much as he preached the gospel. And that is that he said, preach the gospel, if necessary, use words. I think that I don't think you find that in the pages of Scripture, except one place in 1 Peter chapter 3, where women are whose wives are unbelievers are told to just demonstrate the truth of Christianity to their husbands by the way they live their lives. In general, the gospel is proclaimed through propositional truth claims, and of course, we should have lives that reflect the truth that we're saying that we hold. But what I hope to see in the coming days from Jordan Peterson is, I love him. I think he's brilliant. I think he probably has a ridiculously high IQ. I think he sees a lot of wisdom, and I think I can't judge his life, but I hope to see in the coming days and years clear propositional truth claims about Christianity, because I do think that that you have to hold certain beliefs to be true. Holding certain beliefs to be true doesn't make you a Christian, because the demons hold many of those same beliefs, but they certainly should be there for anyone that is truly a Christian.
Yeah. Mr. Deflating Atheism.
Oh, I mean, I think that's I agree with everything Braxton just said. I think we do have a intrinsic need for purpose, intrinsic need for meaning, and intrinsic need for God. I think all forms of idolatry are kind of mismatches. I think that is the telos, that our urge for God meets God, not some idol. So yeah, that's about all I have to say about that.
Right on. And Senor Dunphy, it's been a while since you've spoken. I know you've been arguing with people in the comment section.
Yeah.
What do you have to say?
Something I did comment in the comment section. I think obviously metaphysically, yeah, atheists would be living inconsistent and not applying their beliefs almost how they live. But I think epistemically, God is so gracious that those who reject Him consciously and just reject through their lifestyles and their choices and so on, can value truth and virtue and live their life according to that, and in a way would be indirectly being faithful or worshiping God, because you're acknowledging those things. You're just not giving full credit in your belief systems and so on, but you can live according to those and have that sense of purpose. But obviously be inconsistent with the entire worldview, but the potentiality is there to live like that even as a non-believer, just like how obviously non-believers live more morally than many Christians.
Yeah. So I guess we'll start wrapping things up. I do want to thank you guys very much for your time. I know this is almost on 2 hours now. Normally episodes are about 1 hour, but there was so much from that debate I really wanted to cover. So I really do appreciate you guys taking the time. But are there any closing thoughts that either of you have?
Well, I kind of want to go back to what Braxton said about how he feels that Jordan Peterson. I guess what you're saying is that he should come to Christ. And so I think for the past, 3 or 4 years, I think Jordan Peterson has been such a bridge, especially for kind of disaffected young men who are really his target audience. I think he laid a bridge for so many of them before the cliffs really started crumbling down. And so I think he kind of helped lead a lot of them to safety, if you guys kind of know what I'm saying. And I really hope that Jordan Peterson himself crosses that bridge.
Well, that brings up a theological point that Stellman and I were discussing before you guys got on today, and that is that I believe that what God wants is for everyone to freely choose to accept Him. But I believe that knowing, God obviously knows whether that's going to happen with Jordan Peterson, and if so, when, or if it's already happened and I'm just confused about it or whatever. And it's just like when anything that is not the way it should be turns out to be the case because of human choices, God can redeem that state of affairs and use it. That's why we get the situation with Joseph's brothers in Genesis. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. Like my brother is adopted, and I don't think that God wanted the circumstances that led to his conception, but I think God can then redeem the situation and make something beautiful out of my brother's life. I think that God would prefer that Jordan Peterson bend the knee to him in an obvious way now, if he hasn't already. But if he hasn't done that yet, I believe that God can use what Jordan Peterson is doing and the station in life he's in right now to affect a strategically good thing for the kingdom. And I think that kind of fits with what you were saying.
Yeah, that's awesome. So to everybody out there, I want you guys to know that in the description are the links to Deflating Atheism's YouTube channel, Braxton Hunter's YouTube channel, Trinity Radio, and there's also a link to the new Trinity Radio Extra channel down there. So people go over there, subscribe. Do you guys have any other places people can find you?
I mean, I could say that if people want to begin studying for begin their theological journey and go deeper, they can do that at Trinity College of the Bible and Theological Seminary. You can do it just like you're watching this video right now. You can just do it sitting at home in your pajamas because it's all online. And there are many people who have no desire to go into professional ministry who do intend to go deeper in their study of the Word. And they can do that at our school. You can get there at trinitysem.edu, trinitysem.edu. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity. And hey, I thank you for having me on the show today, Stellman and John.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and do you have any other places people can find you? Deflating Atheism?
Not really too busy. It's kind of craziness. Okay. Yeah, I have the YouTube channel. I've been having difficulty with the BitChute account. I've been having some bugs with uploading my things to BitChute. Hopefully I'll get that back up. And an Instagram page. That's about it.
Yeah, and of course there's a link in the description to John Dunphy's YouTube channel. John, thanks as always for helping me co-host.
Yeah, I need to say something. I think I changed my name to Braxton Hunter because I think I'm going to change that name because I look more like a Braxton Hunter. Braxton Hunter looks like Vin Diesel. So
I'll take it.
By the way, if we ever do this again, we're all going to be in Braxton's room.
That's right.
or your room.
I'm all for it.
We'll see. Yeah, and just real quick, last thing, if you guys want to support this ministry, subscribestar.com/TUA. You can subscribe there for $10 a month. You get access to all the bonus content, web extendeds, and more. But if you can't do that, I totally understand. But what you can do for absolutely free is subscribe to this channel, click notification bells, because subscriptions don't mean a whole lot. And again, thank you to Deflating Atheism, Dr. Braxton Hunter. And I'll see everybody next time.